I got the idea for Singing to the Lions from the elections in 2008. As people who live in Zimbabwe know, it was a very, very rough time. There was a lot of oppression going on. There was a lot of fear. There were a lot of roadblocks, a lot of intimidation all over the country. And I just thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a way to deal with all of this?
So Singing to the Lions started with some research that was done in Zimbabwe. It was piloted in Zimbabwe, in Uganda, and in Sierra Leone, and has become wildly popular around the world ever since. It was produced initially by CRS, by the Africa Justice and Peace Working Group, as part of our philosophy on peace building and creating social cohesion. It's that building up of internal strength, overcoming loss, addressing fears that we have. All of us have fears in our lives, or violence of various types. And so it's part of that binding, the internal work that we do. And then the second half of Singing to the Lions addresses the bonding, how we work with other people, which prepares us for the work after the workshop, which is part of our bridging, our working with others, with authority, other groups, and so on.
I had a dream, and the dream was, in the beginning, very scary. It was basically all my fears coming from the 2008 elections, because I had been stopped, I had been searched, my car had been searched. Sometimes the police were quite intimidating. And I had a dream that all my fears were coming in the form of lions, and that they were surrounding me, and that there was nothing I could do, and I was utterly trapped, and they were coming closer and closer and closer, and I just knew this was the end. And then suddenly this group of children came walking, singing down the street where I was trapped. And they were singing and singing and singing, and this calm settled over everything. And the lions began actually purring, and the children came to the lions and started petting them. And then I was free. And I just thought this was another indication that I really need to do this book, I need to do this program. So what happens is, before the workshop, we have meetings with the parents, if we're doing it for children, with the children involved. We have meetings with the community leaders just to introduce them to the Singing to the Lions concepts. Then we have the Singing to the Lions workshop itself, which can be 3 days or 3 one-day sessions, or even 3-hour modules or 2-hour modules if you're using it in the schools. We begin with discovering who we are, and then we go to understanding fear and violence. Because now that we know who we are, we need to understand what we're up against. So we have exercises that show the impact of violence on our lives. We do the hurt game, which is what happens, the different ways that violence hurts people. We have the round and round game, which is the idea that violence just goes round and round, and that you may be the perpetrator one day, but you'll become the victim the next. So we move from there, understanding fear and violence, to strengthening who we are. Basically, understanding ourselves better, looking at beliefs we have about ourselves and seeing whether they're true or not. For example, we have an exercise, "It's not my fault." Looking at what is your fault truly and what isn't your fault. Because part of the impact of violence and fear is you're made to blame yourself, and that disempowers you, that takes away your power. And then it's very important, basically, to make connections, because part of the impact of violence and fear is that you get socially isolated, or your family gets socially isolated. You might be the wrong religion, you might have the wrong political beliefs, and the system at large wants you to believe that you're wrong and wants you to believe the dominant belief. So it's very important then that you make connections. So we have an exercise, for example, called the helpers. And there we present different situations, and you figure out who you would go to in those situations. For example, let's say the army's at your door. Who would you call or go to? And what we do is we line up chairs, and we have the different people that the participants had named as people they would go to, and they line up in front of those people. And you can see instantly then, for later work in the community, who the important people are that you want to include in the program. And then finally, it's basically taking problems and how do we cut them down to size. And it's moving forward, we call it. And it's a very important exercise, that's climbing up the mountain. How do we take insurmountable problems that seem insurmountable? And how do we break them down to each little bit that we can conquer, that we can resolve? You know, we have a nervous system called the autonomic nervous system, right? And when it gets activated, our heart beats faster, our breath comes faster, everything is faster. And we need to learn to slow it down. And the beautiful thing about breathing is they found through trial and error and through years and years, in fact, hundreds of years of practicing, that the way to slow down our autonomic nervous system is simply by breathing deeply and slowly and then exhaling deeply and slowly. And by doing this, the body calms, the mind calms. And there's an interesting relationship between the body and the mind. And often medical science just treats the body and psychology just treats the mind. And we're finding in the field of such things as behavioral medicine that we have to take them together, and that the body influences the mind and the mind influences the body. And what we do in this program is we do both. We try to find ways that we teach people that they can talk to their bodies through breathing, and that also their bodies can talk to their mind. So isn't it wonderful that we can do these breathing exercises that have been around for hundreds of years, that come from psychology, that come from yoga, that come from medicine, and calm our nervous system so we can think clearly. The other thing is that when we're exposed to violence and fear, our sense of self takes a beating. So we decided that wouldn't it be wonderful if we could help people find a way to really separate what the environment is telling them about themselves. For example, a bully might tell a kid, you're no good, you're lousy, you're useless, right? Or a teacher or anybody, right? Or in cases of political intimidation, the environment says you're the wrong tribe, you're the wrong ethnic group, you're the wrong religion. And for people able to just separate themselves out and realize they're still good and what their essential goodness is. There's an exercise we call the treasure tree, which is where you create inside this tree, which is invulnerable, it's indestructible, a sense of yourself and all the good qualities about yourself that can never be taken away from you. Even if your body is hurt, they can never take away this soul, this essence of you that's so good.
I have learned how to react when someone is bullying me or others. I have learned what elements other people might be, and we must make an effort to understand them and their elements as they are. No one is perfect, and everyone is different. So if someone differs from you, don't hate them.
We have an exercise called the Tree of Life. And in the Tree of Life, we draw our tree, and the roots are where we come from. On the left side are the things that happened to us that held us back or had a negative impact. On the right side, because it's right, are the good things. And then we have the branches, the leaves, the fruits, and the fruits are the important people in our life, the gifts we've been receiving in our life. The branches are the directions we want to go in our life. And then we have insects, which are basically the obstructions in our life. And so this is a way that we can help people begin to plan for the future and see their life laid out in front of them. It's one of the first exercises in Singing to the Lions, and then people come back to it continually throughout the program.
The favorite thing I have learned is to calm myself. I do it by breathing in and out.
In terms of cognitive behavioral therapy and changing the channel, it's a way that we can think differently. So it's the idea that we have different channels in our heads, or we're like a radio or we're like a television, and that we have the fear channel, the love channel, the anger channel, the hopes channel, and that we can the calm channel, and we teach people how to move between the different channels and especially end at the calm channel in a way through breathing, through thinking about a calm place, a relaxing place, using once again the power of visualization. They can get a sense of calm. And we keep encouraging throughout the whole workshop breathing and calmness because that's so important.
I've learned how to easily change my mood towards people as frequently and as often as I need to. And I think most importantly, I've learned how to be sensitive with people, because people really are different and they react in different ways. So the best thing is to be tolerant and sensitive.
In the Four Squares activity, what's happening is we're taking our negative beliefs and we're dissolving them so that we can input or overcome our negative beliefs by putting in positive beliefs. And this is where drumming is very important, or tapping. We use the drumming method because it fits very well with Africa, but we found other countries love it as well. So what happens is people take what they're scared of, they draw it as bigger, they divide basically the piece of paper into 4 squares, and then they drum. Then they do it a bit smaller, they drum, and they're aware of how they're feeling. Then they do it even smaller, now the size of their fingernail, and they drum. And then they do it the size of a dot, and they drum. And then they go back to their safe place, and they look at the safe place, they take it into themselves, and they drum. So this is an example of how basically we're taking our negative beliefs, our fears, and we're replacing them with positive beliefs, the safe place.
I think the workshop is transformative. It actually is very helpful. It helps children transform the negative thoughts, the negative beliefs they have about themselves to very positive beliefs. Yeah. And that sort of helps. I mean, by the end of the day, you can actually feel that they are empowered. They're much more confident.
From the world of dance therapy, basically our body learns and our mind learns. And often our body learns in a different way than our mind learns. So what we're doing is we have a poem called Freedom from Fear. And we're always using movement throughout Singing to the Lions. And so this is a way that our bodies are learning as well as our minds are learning. And people find that when they do the movements, the experience, the calmness or the new revelations they have can come back to them. So anytime they want to enter that particular state of mind, that state of emotion, they do that body movement. And so we're constantly repeating body movements throughout Singing to the Lions, whether it's through breathing, whether it's through exercises, whether it's through reciting the poem, Freedom from Fear. We use song, we use dance, we use drawing, and that leads us to talking about how do people learn. So I spoke to a lot of people, a lot of teachers, I read a lot of the research, and we learn in many different ways. Some of us are auditory learners by listening, some of us are visual learners, some of us are kinesthetic learners, meaning we have to do it to learn it. So Singing to the Lions uses all modalities. And we found also from reading the literature that the more modalities you can use, the higher the probability that people will learn and hold on to that learning. So that's the fun of Singing to the Lions. It's active. It's not only educational, informative. We learn through our bodies, we learn through our actions. And in that way, we learn even better.
During Singing to the Lions, there's a lot of joy and fun that I've experienced. Nothing can explain the happiness and the joy that I have when people begin to realize what's in themselves.
After the workshop, there's a feedback to the community and feedback to the school and other children, where the children present what they've learned. And if there are adults involved, the adults present what they've learned. And then the most important part is what happens after the workshop. And this is where the action committees come in and the Singing to the Lions clubs come in. So what happens in the action committee is that basically all the issues that get brought up in the workshop go to a resource person who's present in the workshop. This resource person can be a community leader, a church elder, a teacher, somebody who's able to link the people in the workshop to important community leaders. So the action committee takes those issues to the community and begins to change things, hopefully through community leaders who have an interest in what's happening. The Singing to the Lions clubs are also very important because what happens is all the activities in Singing to the Lions get practiced and repeated in the clubs. They can meet daily, weekly, whatever's convenient for people. And then people go out and try the skills. They try the skills on themselves, they try the skills on people they care about, they try the skills in institutions like schools, and then they come back and report. And then they all trade information, they upgrade their skills through the resource person, through other people who've taken the workshop, they exchange ideas and see how they can even do it better, and they go back and do it again. they also try out new skills, right? So as you go through the Singing to Lions clubs, each week, month, whenever they meet, they get to try out new skills, first in the group, then with others, and then perhaps in the institutions they live with. And also the issues that come up in the clubs get fed back to the action committee. So this is the outcome we're hoping for Singing to the Lions, where Singing to the Lions not only gives people skills and knowledge to deal with violence and fears, but it actually creates change.
It's very important to us to get evidence from around the world to see if this really does make a positive difference in children's lives, in the lives of young people. So we built right into the training and into the manual guidance for a monitoring and evaluation that's very easy to use. You don't need special training for this. Some of the preliminary data has been amazing, and what's really fantastic is that we build on skills. This is not just knowledge, but we actually practice skills in the workshop and reinforce them after the workshop, and found that a lot of these are retained by the young people so that their scores not only go up from before the workshop to after, that you expect, but even retain or get better with the reinforcement 3 months later. The more countries, the more communities that can share this information, the stronger the evidence base will be, and the more we can use this and apply this in other countries, in proposals, in other ways.
I've learned that there are a lot of ways to tackle a problem, and taking small steps is always the best option.
So we knew right away that although this was developed in Africa, that it would be applicable to countries and settings around the world. And it can be used in post-conflict situations, in areas with a lot of gang violence, where there's tensions due to poverty and human trafficking and other pressures in society, a wide variety of circumstances. And that also meant that we need to be culturally sensitive and allow for changes that can be made depending on the environment. Well, so among the changes is, of course, lions only exist in Africa. They might exist in our imagination in other places. So when this was done in Spanish, they said, we'll keep the lions. And in French as well. But in Arabic, we've made a number of changes. The illustrations are different. And there we are singing to the wolves. And those kinds of adaptations, both in the content and the illustrations, as well as in the animal that represents our fear, that is done and can be done in different settings.
Singing to the lions actually helps children, even adults, to cope with fear and violence. It actually helps people to calm themselves, identify their internal resources and external resources so that they can be able to cope.
We had the idea that the workshop needs to be contextualized to the local setting. So the first way that this is done is that it can be conducted in 3 full days or in 6 half days of 3 hours, sessions of about 3 hours each. It's meant for ages 11 to about 25. Obviously, you don't want to mix an 11-year-old with a 24-year-old, but within that group. It can be adapted for ages 8 to 10, and we have found that adults really like it. They might not want to dance and move quite as much, so it can be adapted for ages 25 and over. Ideally about 20 persons, plus or minus. It can be male, female, or mixed, again, depending on the context. And we like to have 2 facilitators. That's always good because if somebody's troubled in the workshop and we have guidance in the manual about how to handle that, then the one facilitator can go to that individual and spend a few minutes privately while the rest of the workshop goes on. We like to have either as one of those facilitators or an additional person to be a resource person from the community. So the resource person would be able to do the follow-up because we have included some follow-up activities that we recommend, a club at the school or community center or so on, and also make referrals to local resources if additional support is needed. It's It's available online. You can Google it online, Singing to the Lions, CRS, and it comes up first. That's very exciting. And we really want to know how people use this. We also want to hear their stories, their anecdotes.
Singing to the lions helps everybody. Singing to the lions, for me, means that you can be able to do the impossible. I mean, the kind of things that people think are not possible can actually be done.